Hi, welcome to your session 5 centering and take-home tool. Today what we're going to do is we're going to begin with the centering that is going to marry with our take-home tool. So we're going to begin that centering, and I'm going to ask several questions, and it's going to be very important that we answer the questions in those centerings because it will end up being a part of the take-home tool, and it might be something we revisit several times throughout the week as part of that tool. So I'm going to go ahead and begin there with a centering practice. So in this moment, I just invite you to relax, close your eyes, if that feels comfortable. Just allow your entire body to become present, centered in this moment. Allow yourself just to take a deep breath, inhaling slowly, and then exhale slowly as well. Just letting go. Surrendering to the moment. Now, as our contemplative process today, as I mentioned, this is something we're going to be using with our take-home tool. What we're going to do is we're going to connect with the concept that the underlying need behind addiction is not about the addictive substance. It's about the need of something else, and our mind believes the addictive substance is the best way to fulfill this need. So what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to provide you with a series of questions. These questions will be available in your contemplative practice after we've completed the centering practice. I'm going to read those aloud now so that you have familiarity with them. These questions are going to connect with the underlying tone of what drives our addiction. And so they'll be relative to that topic. So question 1, do I have a problem I need to solve? Is there something that is triggering stress or frustration for me? If I have a problem I need to solve, what is the best solution for that problem? Question 2 is, what do I really want? Again, these questions are in response to addictive cravings. So what do I really want in this moment? Do I want to feel calm? Do I want to feel relieved? Do I want to feel safe? Maybe I want to feel happy. Question 3 will be, what else gives me this solution? What else gives me this thing I feel I need? What healthy thing is available to me instead of my addictive substance? Simpler questions can be, what serves my healthiest life? Or what serves a healthy life for the people around me? I know that everyone in my life deserves to be happy, and that this includes me but isn't exclusive to me. So what is the best thing for me to do in this moment to serve the happiness of everyone in my life? So for those of you who would like to use this as your practice today, to do just the contemplative practice and then return for the take-home tool tomorrow, you can do that now. You might even want to stay in this question for a day or two, or you can continue to see what the take-home tool is and how this relates into it if you'd like. But if you do want to just work on your centering practice today, this is where you want to pause the video. For those of you that want to continue, we will be doing that now. So what I want to talk about today a little bit as we go into this take-home tool is about breaking the brain down into two parts. We have the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. Now, the subconscious mind is significantly stronger and more efficient than the conscious mind. This is where all of our survival mechanisms are located, where all of our processes that run our body, all of that. So of the 86 billion neurons in the brain, 83 billion of those are in the subconscious mind. The conscious mind only has 3 billion neurons. So everything in the conscious mind that exists is fed to it by the subconscious mind. An easy example for this is like a color. If you point to a stop sign and ask me what color is that, I'm going to say red, and it's going to feel instant. But there was a point in my life where I needed to learn the color red and to associate the word red to that color. And I learned it, and all this information was stored in my subconscious mind so that when you ask me today, I can just quickly answer red, right? So I don't feel all that processing. It happens in fractions of a second. This is an important thing for us to remember about how the brain's working. So we can think about this in the respect of speaking words, the words I'm speaking right now. All of these words I had to learn at some point, this knowing what an apple is. And so the conscious mind, what happens is fed to it as suggestions by the subconscious mind. The issue is the conscious mind seldom questions the suggestions that the subconscious mind is feeding it. So example, if you see a frog, you don't pause to wonder if frog is the right word for that animal. We don't need to, and this is what makes our brain so highly efficient, is that once we've learned something, we can recollect it, a series of things that we've learned, to pull together, like with words and sentences. We can do that quickly, efficiently. The issue is that they are just suggestions from the subconscious mind to the conscious mind. The conscious mind is less efficient. It's slower. It doesn't recall all those words as fast. So when you're struggling to remember a word, that's the conscious mind trying to access the information. The subconscious mind has it. So the bigger issue is that the more threatened that we are, so the more we feel threatened in any situation, the stronger the suggestions become. In fact, with situations like addiction, they become so strong that we don't feel we can deny them. Our brain gives us multiple options throughout the day, and plenty of suggestions that we reject. If we might get hungry and we might say, actually, I'm not really hungry right now. I only just ate. I must need a drink of water instead. Or we may think of how many times a day we might have a craving and reject it. So those cravings are just the subconscious mind saying, I need this for whatever reason. And the reasons are going to be varying. I don't want to get into those. So we'll get to know all these parts of the brain in great detail over time. We'll discuss how to improve the subconscious mind's decisions, how it's making its decisions, and the suggestions it's offering to us. But until then, what I want to do is give you a tool to manage your cravings by using the small amount of control that the conscious mind does have. And so this would be willpower. But what I want to do is set up a tool that makes willpower a thing that does have an effect on the subconscious mechanisms, rather than just having to fight it with just willpower. We'll actually start to change some of those suggestions from the subconscious mind. Again, it'll be a temporary process, but it's a really good one for the beginning of addiction recovery. So it's temporary, but it is a good tool to use while we build something more permanent. So this take-home tool is a 4-part tool. You already did one of the parts, and I'm going to talk about how that fits in. So I'm going to explain the tool here and the take-home tool, and then you'll have a chance to practice it throughout the week. Okay, so the first step of our process is a reprogramming step. Reprogramming will never work long-term, but it can have an impact, especially in combination with deeper work. So step 1 in this process is about beginning that programming process. And what I call it is that it's not like me too. One of the things we need to understand about the brain is that what it does and the decisions it makes are a habit. They're not necessarily the truth. So what we want to do is learn how to reprogram the mind without beating ourselves up. So instead of beating ourselves up, we're going to use a tool that will start to reprogram the way the brain works, instead of just trying to deal with a brain that we feel like disappointed by or frustrated with in circumstances like addiction. So I have a little story to share. I did a class. It was one of those really popular reprogramming type classes that happened in the 90s when this idea of programming thought became possible, before we knew as much as we do about the brain now. But in it, this person was talking about how somebody in a group that they were leading that was part of a married couple was talking about one of the things that they were struggling with. And they said to the person leading the class, but, you know, when I go home, I'm still going to have the same problem. And so the instructor said, actually, I want you to go home and I want you to do an exercise. And then I want you to report back to me in a month. I'm going to give you a month-long exercise. And I want you to report back to me in a month on what happens. And so they had the person go home, and what they had is they were in a relationship where the person that they were with would only wanted to sit around on the couch and watch sports all the time and be waited on, basically. And so what the leader of the workshop did was they told them, I want you to just go home and do one thing. And then what I want you to do is take note of the responses from your spouse. So what you're going to do is you're going to say, anytime your spouse does this thing that bothers you, what I want you to do is look at them and say, honey, it's not like you to do that. Now, the person thought it was weird, but they agreed to do it. And they actually reported back after the month. And this is what they said happened. They said the first week, of course, their spouse was coming home and heading straight for the couch and demanding things to eat and drink. And what the person started doing is every time they did, every demand they made, the minute they came home and sat on the couch, they'd say, honey, it's not like you to do that. Let's go do something like we used to do when we were first married. And they said that the first week of saying this, that the person looked at him like they were crazy, which makes sense, right? If you have a habit and you go to do the habit and somebody that you know really well looks at you and says, wow, it's not like you to do that. It's that look that's like, what are you talking about? I do this all the time. Our brain works the same way. It argues in that same way when we say things to it. Right? Well, what's interesting though, is what happened in the second week is they said the person started to look confused. Their spouse started to look confused, like there was a part of their brain noticing the pattern and it didn't make sense to them. And it was really interesting is that they said actually by the third week that the person came home, the spouse came home and actually walked in the door. The person offered them some dinner and actually said, would you like some dinner? Actually offered to serve them. And what the spouse responded with saying was, well, honey, you know, that's not like me. Let's go out. Now, I don't give you this to use on your spouses. Nothing like this will ever work long term. The point of this is the brain can be reprogrammed. Now, when we first start saying things to it, it will argue. If I say, wow, it's not like me to use my addiction, my brain will go, what are you talking about? That's totally like you, right? But within a short amount of time, if I keep saying it, then I will start to think differently. My brain will start to question itself. Now, like I said, this used alone is not a solution, and this used long term is not a solution. However, for the 4-step process we're going to use, it is a very good step 1 in that process. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with that. We're going to start by telling the brain, wow, it's not like me to. So the way this will work is anytime you have a craving for your addiction, you're going to say to your brain, wow, it's not like me to want that. Step 2. So let's move to step 2, because again, your brain might already be arguing, and that's fine. It might argue in the beginning, but this is going to be a 4-step process. Step 2 is we're going to do a thing called before I have or do. Now, addicts are very skillful. Now, a lot of people think that they don't have the ability to counter their addiction. However, if we look at the life of an addict, we can see that addicts are very skillful at getting what they want, getting their goal. And so what we want to do is use that skill to our advantage instead of to our detriment. So instead of talking ourselves into doing things, we want to talk ourselves out of them. And this is a really big thing. The truth is that most of us that have addictive tendencies talk ourselves into the addiction. We're having stress and we think, oh, I want this. And we go, no, I know I shouldn't have it. And then we argue with ourselves, eventually talking ourselves into it. What we want to do instead is talk ourselves out of it. So to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to make a list and we're going to say 5 things we don't like about it. Now, in my personal story, one of the harder things for me to quit after I quit all my other addictions was smoking. Smoking was a very difficult thing to quit. And I used this process to quit smoking. And I couldn't initially think of 5 things I didn't like about smoking. I can think of hundreds now, but when I first did this practice, I couldn't think of a single thing. And I started to realize how much I believed I loved smoking, that I couldn't even think of the things like the way it made my clothes smell, the way it made me smell overall, the way it actually caused fatigue and buildup on my teeth, and how I had to go do it. I didn't like the way people who didn't smoke looked at me, and having to find places to smoke, and not being able to have a cigarette when I really craved one. So there were all these things I really did hate about it, but I never considered because I was too busy talking myself into loving it. And so when we start to tell the brain we don't like something, it will start to shift its craving. I'm to the point now where if I smell cigarette smoke from hundreds of yards away, I actually get a gag reflex. My body is so adverse to smoking, and I think it's because of this practice. So with just these 2, just step 1 and step 2, I cut myself in a very short time from a pack and a half of cigarettes a day to 5 cigarettes a day. I use the last 2 steps to completely break free of smoking with no other aids, no other tools. And so it's a really powerful process if we use it. So part of what you're going to be doing is making a list of the things you don't like about your addictive substance, or that you don't like about being an addict. And you're going to talk yourself out of your addiction instead of into it. So the third thing we're going to do really has to do with the centering practice we did. We had a list of questions we were asking, and you can see kind of now how this ties in. So what you're going to do in this practice is you're going to have step 1 and step 2, and then after you've named the 5 things you don't like, so basically if I was still a smoker and had a craving for a cigarette, what I would do is first of all say, wow, it's not like me to have a cigarette. Regardless of how my brain responds, doesn't matter. I'm just going to say it's not like me to have a cigarette. And then I'm going to name 5 reasons why I don't like to have cigarettes. And then if I still have the craving after, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reflect for a minute to say, okay, why do I really want a cigarette? What really do I want a cigarette for? Now, one of my big contemplations here with smoking was the fact that that was the only time I ever took a break. So it meant I got a break. So it was like a little reward. It was a chance to get away, just to walk away from like my work for a minute. It also is the only time I took a deep breath. I was the person who held my breath all the time, but when I smoked, I took deep breaths. And so what I really need is I knew I need to pause. I need to take a deep breath. I need relief from this moment or the situation. I'm feeling stressed and I need something to shift gears. There are a lot of things I found I needed by asking this question. So we're going to stop and we're going to contemplate. Now, it's great to spend a couple days in this contemplation to get a really good list. And you can still use the first steps and then have this be part of it. Those questions will be in your practice tools. They're also in that centering practice if you want to listen to them again. There will be a slight variance to what's written. So, but those are available in your centering practice. So step 4, I'm going to give you the last step. And step 4 is what I call substitution. So we have this long list of things that we've created. And so this step is just what it sounds like. When I feel like I want to do or have this, I'm going to do or have this instead. And it seems really basic, but it's a great way to set off a new process, right? And some of us already learned this. I often joke with people and say, this is why there are always cigarettes and coffee and donuts at AA meetings. Like most of my meetings had multiple of those because we've learned substitution, and it is a healthy way to not be in our addictive substance. It is a great way to avoid it. And if we can get ourselves a nice long list of things, that's the real tool. And part of this course, part of what we're doing in this program is giving you lists of things that actually start to alter the brain function. So this early one is process driven. This isn't as much about altering brain function as future things will be, but it is something that gives us some strength in the beginning when we're at the part that's the hardest. As we continue forward, I'll be giving you tools to use in substitution that will actually eliminate addiction. But in the beginning, this is a good one to try and manage it. So again, this is how it looks. If I start to have a craving, I'm going to use the cigarette example again. If I start to crave cigarettes, I'm going to say, wow, it's not like me to have a cigarette. Then I'm going to name 5 things that I do not like about smoking. And then I'm going to say, what do I really want in this moment? What do I really want here? And then I'm going to say, well, instead of having a cigarette, I'm going to do that instead. I'm going to do this thing that will give me that same result instead. So last week we talked a little bit about that sensory concept of connecting with what do I really want, that internal feeling, what I call the 6th sense, is that internal body that says, boy, I'm really needing something right now that I don't have. And with addiction, a lot of it is a relief of suffering. We'll get into that in great depth as we go forward, but really for the time being, just finding even little simple things that are substitutions, even if it is a cup of coffee or a glass of water, find the things that work. And this week will really be about playing with that. So that's your take-home tool for the week. I will have a meditation for you on Sunday that will connect to this tool, and then I'll look forward to seeing you again here next week. I wish you great success over the week, and I look forward to connecting with you along the way.